ProDog Raw. So if you're a dog owner who'd like to feel equipped to make the best nutritional choices for your dog, then you're in exactly the right place. We'll be talking all about the immense benefits of feeding a natural diet to your dog. I'm Anna, I'm part of the ProDog team, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Katie Woodley, also known as the Natural Pet Doctor, a renowned holistic vet dedicated to helping pet parents get to the root of their pets' health issues. She's a total advocate of natural and raw feeding for pets. We're really happy to have you here as you're one of our regular Ditch the Dry supporters. So welcome to you, Dr. Katie.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be
And
here today.
I've got loads of questions for you that I think will be really helpful to our listeners. But just before we get into that, as I've mentioned, it's Ditch the Dry month during August. And for those of you who don't know, Ditch the Dry is ProDog's annual campaign, sharing the benefits of choosing a natural diet for dogs and hopefully inspiring more dog owners to make that switch away from highly processed foods. And I'll let you know a little bit more about what's going on this month towards the end of the video. So stay tuned and you'll find out how you can win £150 worth of ProDog food, treats or supplements. But in today's conversation, we'll be chatting about the transformative power of a raw diet, answering some of the most common questions and sharing some practical steps to help you make the switch. So for those people who've always fed kibble, who've always fed a commercially processed pet food diet, can you explain the main differences between dry, kibble and raw food diets? And when we talk about a natural whole
Yeah.
food or raw diet, what exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, this is a great question. And usually what I think about when we're thinking about like dry, kibble, processed food, it's going versus a more natural, minimally processed, fresh food diet like raw food. We're going to be looking at like the ingredients, we're going to be looking at processing methods and also two nutritional profiles come into play when we compare the two. So with dry kibble, what we're looking at is traditionally it's going to be a mix of yes, we have proteins and other ingredients going in, but there's also a lot of carbohydrates. So typically these foods are going to be more than 50% carbohydrate based because of the way that they're processed in order to form the kibble. Also, too, there can be fillers. There can be a lot of times synthetic vitamins and minerals that have to be added in order to process the food. And I think a lot of people don't really understand, including myself at the beginning of my vet career. I didn't really understand how the extrusion process and how kibble was actually made. And the process of extrusion is really where they're taking like the dough, it's fed through an extruder, it's exposed to really high heat temperatures. So these temperatures are typically 200 degrees Fahrenheit to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and really high pressure to help kill the bacteria, cook it, and then turn it into that little kibble that you are then potentially feeding your dogs. Now, while it's an efficient process, we have to also look at some of the downsides with the high heat temperatures and the way that they do this, because what's also happening, and many people don't realize that through that high heat temperature processing of kibble, it's producing other chemicals because of that. So I always think about like when I take a piece of meat and I cook it on the barbecue, and sometimes you overcook it, right? You get that like black crustiness charcoal. So that is a process that we've gone through, which has created that crustiness, and it's actually creates more oxidative stress. It's inflammatory, and it's going to lead to inflammation in the body. So unfortunately, this process is also doing the same with kibble. So what's happening is that these compounds are being formed because of all the sugars, that's the carbohydrates, the proteins and fats, and how they all interact together. It's called a Maillard reaction. They're actually producing these things called advanced glycation end products. And the problem with these is that they are known carcinogens. Carcinogen means they can lead to cancer down the road because of the inflammation they produce. So I wanted to highlight that because when I found that out, that this has to occur when we process kibble in order to make kibble, I was like, that's no good. Because over time, if we're constantly exposing our dogs to this, it is going to increase inflammation. It can lead to chronic health issues down the road. We can't say it's going to cause a problem, but we know it's there because we've tested for it. So that's a huge issue. The other part of these kibble diets is that we're using rendered products. So especially here in the States, we're not using like the chicken you think about when you go to the grocery store and you pick up that like chicken breast and you're like, it looks good, it looks nice and healthy. I'm going to go home and cook it for my family. Unfortunately, in the pet food industry, there's a difference between feed and food ingredients. Feed is not fit for human consumption. So I wouldn't even technically call it food. Like we aren't allowed to eat that because it has cancer in it, it's moldy, it's expired. So when you think about where does all the food go from like restaurants that are left over, from the grocery stores where it's expired, it actually goes into our pet food industry. And that's where it goes to these rendering facilities to be boiled down, including with like plastic packets, right? They don't remove that from there. And they're boiling it down to then create the meat meal that you see when you look at the ingredient list with a lot of these products. So kibble isn't like you see these pictures of like beautiful like fruits and like the chickens and eggs and you're like that's great, that's I feel really good feeding that. But when we actually get into like the deeper darker like secrets of the pet food industry and truly understand the rendering, the extrusion process, what types of ingredients are actually going into this, it really exposes like wow, that's why we're seeing so many pets with chronic health issues now. Now, on the flip side, when we look at minimally processed fresh food diets, it is the things like the chicken that you're feeding yourself. So, a lot of times, especially companies that are really into making sure that their food is the highest quality, the best possible, you're going to see human grade ingredients being used. So, they're not using feed grade like on the kibble and a lot of those companies. It is more expensive because of that, but it's actual food. So I know personally, I feel much more comfortable knowing that my pets are getting human grade ingredients. It's also not processed. So it's not going through that extruder process. It's not being cooked at high heat temperatures. It's preserving the vitamins and minerals that are naturally present and the enzymes. So it's more attuned to what your dog should be eating and what they would eat if they were able, like out in the wild, right? Yes, our dogs are not wolves. They descended, of course, but like they're getting fresh food that's not processed. Their bodies will be able to absorb it better. We're not having to use as many synthetic vitamins and minerals, if any. So we're not having to make the body work harder to absorb those things too. So we need to think about like what are the ingredients coming in? Very different between minimally processed raw food diets versus those kibble diets. How is it being processed? And then we look at the nutritional profile tends to be higher because it's more easily absorbed by our dogs. So there's a quite a big difference when we're looking at that, right? And I just wanted to share some of those things because as a veterinarian at the start of my career, when I just didn't know any better, because I wasn't taught about these processes in vet school, it was just very shocking to really understand what actually went into the kibble.
Yeah, it was very, very eye opening for me also when I first learned about all of this. And I think back to being a kid and the family dogs that we had then, and it was never questioned. It was always the norm to just feed commercially processed pet food. And as you've quite rightly
Yep.
mentioned, the marketing of that is very clever in terms of you feel because of the packaging, because of the way that it's all presented, that you are doing the best for your dog. So when I learnt all of this stuff, it was really, really eye opening. But it's the same. It's
Yep.
exactly the same principles as when we talk about human nutrition, isn't it? And there's a lot in the media, um, and a lot of research now into those intensively processed foods and the impact that that has on human health. So I guess it's no different for
Yep.
our dogs as mammals also.
Yeah, one of the things that I always allude to also is thinking about for ourselves, like, we always say, what would you do if you took your like newborn baby to the pediatrician and you're like, what do I feed them? and you're asking that doctor for their opinion. And I always say, like, what would you do if they put like a box of Cheerios? I think you have Cheerios probably over in the UK, right? Like a processed, like, I don't, it's not even cooked probably at these high heat of temperatures, but it has synthetic vitamins and minerals. It says it's like balanced on the label, and it's healthy. It's heart healthy. I
Yes.
remember seeing that. I haven't eaten Cheerios and I don't know how long, but heart healthy. And if that doctor put that down and said, you're going to feed this for every single meal for the rest of your like baby's life, you would be like, what is happening, right? But then when we actually flip it and we look at, well, we're actually doing that as veterinarians. We're telling our clients, like, hey, here's this kibble diet, this really highly processed food that has synthetic vitamins and minerals, zero variety, and tons of studies to show it doesn't support gut health and microbiome and can lead to inflammatory conditions and disease down the road. But it's like, why would we do that for our pets if we wouldn't do it for ourselves? And it's, it comes down to just not like understanding that connection. So I always like try to keep it as simple as possible. Think, would you want to eat Cheerios for the rest of your life? Maybe for a little bit, but you get sick of it. But also, too, your health would suffer long term. And also, the same thing actually
Yeah.
happens with our dogs. I saw it with my own dog, Finn, where he was on kibble because that's what I was taught in vet school. So when we had him as a puppy, I started him on kibble. He actually got to a point where he would spit it out and look at me. And I'm like, now I fully understand. I'm feeding him like cardboard. He doesn't probably feel the best on that. And then when I switched him to a fresh food diet, he started dancing and spinning and barking for every meal, and he absolutely loved it. Like, it brings so much joy to my heart just thinking of the memories of him doing that. And then also to seeing the massive changes, which I know we're going to be talking about some of the health benefits of transitioning. So if your dog is picky and you're currently feeding a kibble diet, like the transformation that can happen and just watching them be excited to eat again because of the like fresh food and they feel good. It's enormous, and it's really powerful to just even watch the transformation that happens in your
Nothing
dog.
can beat that. Nothing can beat that. When you witness your dog, when you witness that transformation of vitality and energy in them, when your dog's not well or they're under the weather and they're not themselves, and you can see they're not themselves, and then to watch that transformation, to be full of life and energy and vitality, they're back to their old selves, but even better selves. Nothing can beat that.
Yeah.
It's it,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it
pretty
is, and that and
amazing.
that leads me
Yeah.
on to my next question. Was going to be, obviously, as a vet and through your own personal experiences, what are the health benefits that you've observed in dogs that have switched from a processed kibble diet to a raw natural diet?
Yeah. There's some transformations that occur pretty quickly when we go from that process to, minimally processed diets like raw. So, dogs' coats, their coats get shinier, they have less dander. I work with a lot of dogs that have skin health issues or itchy, scratchy. You start seeing that go away and they don't smell as much. A lot of these dogs have overgrowth of yeast, and, high carb diets are just feeding that. And so we see a lot of those skin issues disappear, which is amazing. It happens within like weeks. It's like one of the fastest first things that happens. The other thing too is like the gut health issues. So I work with a lot of dogs that have inflammatory bowel disease, autoimmune, they have sensitive guts, they have acid reflux. They transition over to a raw food diet and those symptoms lessen or even disappear. Also, too, like their stools firm up, there's less for their guts to have to process, there's less inflammatory ingredients. So these are really, really helpful for so many pets with these chronic health problems that plague so many dogs. The other thing, too, the energy levels I mentioned just with my own Finn, like, he's kind of like, nah, I'm not, it's okay, life's fine. And then we start feeding him a raw food diet, and he's like, let's go for runs. Like, I'm so excited for life. And you see that over and over and over again because they're able to extract those nutrients because it's not processed and it doesn't have the synthetic ingredients and all those inflammatory chemicals that I mentioned. The other thing too is if you're feeding like raw meaty bones as part of this also, like their dental health improves significantly. See that with so many of my clients. I saw it personally with Finn. What was really nice is that we started feeding those and then we didn't need to do dental cleanings. There's a time and a place for dental cleanings. I'm not against them, especially when they're needed, but his teeth, he managed it on his own because he was using the bones as like a natural toothbrush and massaging those gums, and that hassle factor that's so important for strengthening the gums and removing that tartar and that plaque. That he had tartar on the back of his molars, his big chewing teeth, and it was gone because he was able to gnaw and chew on those. The other big thing too is we have an obesity epidemic in our dogs. So many animals are overweight, and it's hard to know because you're comparing them to another overweight animal. So you're like, they look good compared to the neighbor's dog, right? But when we get them off of these high carb diets that create insulin resistance and can lead to things like, diet type 2 diabetes, and we get them onto a more species appropriate diet like raw food, their their hormones rebalance, they don't have the insulin resistance, they actually become sensitive again, their blood sugar levels regulate, and they start losing the extra weight, the extra fat. The other thing too is, when we have a lot of studies that show this, that their microbiome, so all those trillions of different types of microorganisms that live in the gut, when we feed a balanced raw food diet with a bit of fiber and variety, we actually support an optimal microbiome in our dogs. And that helps also with weight loss. So it's doing numerous things in the body. So we see it as, better skin and coat, better gut health, their breath smells fresher, they have less dental disease, they're at a more optimal weight, they have more energy levels. So those are the like main common ones that I notice with a lot of my
It's just
clients.
absolutely foundational, isn't it? Nutrition. It really is.
Yes, food is the foundation. Food is medicine,
And it's funny that
100%.
you mentioned dogs smelling at the beginning of that, because my friend came to stay at the weekend and he commented on the fact that my house doesn't smell of dog, even though I have a dog that lives with me. And I said, well, he doesn't smell though. And he said, oh, all dogs smell. I said, well,
Yeah,
not necessarily, not if they're fed a diet that suits them. Each dog's different, each dog's individual,
yeah.
as we know. But if you find the sweet spot for your dog, uh, you quite often may not get those smells associated with dogs. But that, you know,
Yeah. I remember, yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, I remember, like, so working in the vet clinic with a lot of like, when I was more conventional and I wasn't doing all of my holistic work, and you're doing your physical exam and you're feeling the animal, and your hands would be like this greasy, like, and you can rub your hand, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like where you rub your hand and it's just this greasy, like dander, and they have that yeasty smell, that like what you're mentioning, that dog smell. And 100% your dog should not smell like that unless they've just rolled in the dirt and had the best day of their life. Like, that's a very different situation. But if you're noticing like, oh, I can tell when my dog's around because it smells, or someone can enter your home
yeah.
and they smell that, like
Mm,
that's a warning sign. You should say, why do they smell like that? It's just like humans, right? We shouldn't be walking
yeah.
around stinky and smelly. Like, that's a sign there's an imbalance. What I know, we're talking about dogs, but I've got 3 cats, and I just wanted to mention, like, before I changed them to a raw food diet, same principles apply to dogs. Anytime one of my previous cats would go to the litter tray and poop, you knew. If I was upstairs, they were downstairs, you're like, that is foul smelling. I don't know when my cats poop anymore because I don't smell anything. When I clean the litter tray, it does not smell. That is a sign of a good, healthy, normal stool. So you see all these changes with smaller poops. They don't have to process as much. That's a key thing too. When you transition to a raw food diet, it scares a lot of like dog parents. Where are they constipated? But these are normal things. The poop should be small. It shouldn't be this large amount of poop where you need like 5 bags to pick it up, that's a sign you have lots of fillers, really high carbohydrates, and the body doesn't need all that. So it just gets rid of it. It doesn't need it. And now you've got more excrement to pick up. That's not
No,
fun for
and
anyone, right?
I think for many people that that in itself would be good enough reason to make the switch, to have
Yes.
less non-smelling dog poo to
Less
pick
poop.
up. So if you're watching and you're
Yes,
sat on the
100%.
fence, that in itself,
Just for the
yeah,
poop change.
that in itself
It's
may swing it
amazing.
for you. But one of the things that very often comes up when I'm talking to people about a raw diet is concerns around safety and preparation of the raw food. So, what advice do you have for
Yeah.
people who are concerned about that type of thing?
Yeah, so what's really neat now, um, I feel very blessed to be in this day and age with a lot of research to back up what we're talking about now. Because before, like Dr. Nick Thompson and all the like Pine and Ian Billinghurst, they didn't have the data. So they saw it. They saw the changes in their patients and they knew it was better. It was more species appropriate. But sometimes it's really hard to back things up with other veterinary colleagues or even with our clients if they're not certain or sure. So I wanted to mention a study. So from Professor Anna Helm Bjorkman and her team at the Dog Risk Study Group at the University of Helsinki. They are the leading experts in raw food research. So what's really neat is they did a 2019 paper, The Owner's Perception of Acquiring Infections Through Raw Pet Food. And so they did this survey and they found that only 0.02% of 16,475 households, so quite a big number, reported disease transfer from raw fed pets to humans. And even those few cases, they weren't conclusively able to prove that the raw food was the cause. 0.02% out of over 16,000 households. That's an enormous amount of people feeding raw who did not get sick. So it's one of those things that I always say, hopefully, people here are also feeding themselves a minimally processed diet where they're cooking meats, handling raw foods in their kitchen. This is exactly the same. However, the difference is that your dogs are actually physiologically made to handle a raw food diet. So from their teeth, when you look at their teeth and how they're set up very differently than us as carnivores, from their stomach acid at a very low pH to neutralize and activate bacteria and pathogens, all the way to their shorter GI tract to eliminate things out compared to a human. So they're made to eat this type of food. Now, we are not, and that's what scares people. So I just wanted to highlight that study, but also, too, this is where common sense comes in. You would never prep a raw chicken breast and then like lick your hands, right? And if you do, you probably get sick, especially if your microbiome and your health isn't strong, your immune system's not strong. So this is where sourcing quality ingredients is really important. Using companies that are also very transparent about their testing procedures is also really key. It's huge over here in the States. When recalls come out, my questions are, okay, well, what are your testing procedures? How are you manufacturing that food? Where are you sourcing? And then the other thing too is the safe handling practices. Now, this comes down to us handling things properly. We are dealing with raw food. So you want to make sure you're thawing it appropriately. Thaw it in the fridge. Don't free or thaw and then refreeze because we know that the pathogens will increase. There will be pathogens in the food. That is okay. We don't want to live in a sterile environment. We are mostly made up of microbes and our microbiomes all throughout our body, and so are our pets. It is a good thing, but just managing safe handling practices, using common sense, washing your hands, washing plates and bowls. So, regular cleaning, those are all really key things. And then, if you are using pre made raw food companies, just asking, what are your testing procedures? How do you manufacture the food? The company should be very open and transparent with those questions. If they're not, don't use them. So like ProDog's great. Like I have no issues recommending ProDog to my clients over in the UK because I know you're very transparent about how you do things, how you process, how you're sourcing those ingredients, you're testing, all of those things. So I feel very comfortable that the food you are providing to the consumer and to pet parents is very safe for them. But then also to on the flip side, as the consumer, make sure you're just going through the normal like common sense practices you would use for yourself if you're preparing yourself like a meat diet and you're, we cook our food typically, and you're cleaning, you're washing up, you're putting away those things, you're not leaving out like the chopping board and not washing it. So same principles apply also for our pets. And as you can see, just even that one survey, very low risk of people getting sick. So I feel very confident. I feed raw to my own pets, and I've never been sick because I just follow those
Yeah,
practices.
and as you said, with the options now, there's so many options in terms of raw food manufacturers and pre-made products that come all packaged up, and it is literally just a case of uh, allowing it to defrost and
Here you
then
go.
putting it in a bowl and then making sure you dispose of the packaging.
Yeah.
If you're obviously DIYing and creating your raw dog food meals yourself from scratch, there's a bit more involved with that, and some people do like to get involved
Yeah.
to that degree. But for others, they're looking for convenience, and there are so many options out there now. So that's
Yeah.
not how it was, say, 20
Yeah.
years ago, is it? So
No, no, I mean, even since I've, over the past,
yeah,
15 years, just watching the industry change, it's incredible. Just in the past 10 years, right? The amount of options people have. And I would say for every dog parent here. So if you're like, listen to the first part of our talk and you're like, I can't feed kibble anymore, and you want to transition over to a raw food diet, start with a pre-made.
yeah,
Don't jump to the DIY. The DIY is very overwhelming for a person that's new to this arena. Use some of these companies out there like ProDog to transition to a raw food diet and get your feet wet, get comfortable with it, watch the transformations we talked about with your dog's health, and then you'll feel more confident. And then if you're like, you know what, I want to be that DIY person, there's definitely ways that you can provide like a balanced and complete raw diet for them. But I always say, like, this is not the time and place to overwhelm yourself. Keep it really, really simple. It might be more expensive at the start. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. However, it's getting your feet wet. It's getting your dog like seeing that transformation, and you'll feel much more confident too when you realize like I'm not getting sick, they're not getting sick, they're getting healthier. And this is actually pretty easy to
yeah.
do.
And I think that's really excellent advice, because there are a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of misconceptions. It can seem baffling, which is why opting for a raw food company such as ProDog is a great option, because it's there for you. And like you quite rightly said, as you get more involved, the longer that you feed raw, you'll automatically learn more about it. And then if creating meals yourself at home is something you like to do, then you can always do that later on down the road. And that sort of leads on to the next question I was gonna ask, because that's another thing that quite often comes up because of all the baffling information out there. How can people be sure that they're feeding a balanced and complete diet? Obviously, when you start to learn about it, and the importance of the ratios between meat and ground bone and offal, and all of that, for someone who's new to it all, what I
Mm,
guess we've sort of covered it to a point, is just start with the pre-made options from raw
yeah.
food manufacturers that have done the work for you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too is that, over here in the States, you see so many companies popping up. And when I look at the ingredients too, my questions are, is this being formulated by someone that is trained in this area? Are they Are they certified in it? Do they have training in creating recipes at a large scale? Very different, right? So that's really important to ask who is on, it comes down to the questions we ask these companies too. So asking who is the formulator? Are you testing? Are you testing also for digestibility? That can be a question. It's not always commonly done because it can be an expense issue too. So it's not something that I will completely write off the companies for if they're not doing that, but there are things to know. The other thing too is that over here in the States, we use, AFCO, formulated to AFCO standards. It's like the lowest level, like that. Okay, we're ticking that at least. Like it's the bare minimum. We need to make sure vitamins and minerals that are going in there, at least we have some regulation around that versus a lot of people just put in like a meat and some calcium or a bone and some vegetables. And it's like, that's not going to end well. So this is where using over here in the States, the list by Susan Thixton with The Truth About Pet Food is a great resource to see what companies are transparent sourcing, doing the testing and making sure it's balanced. Your certain certifications and requirements too that you have also that you want to be looking for with looking at companies. And I'll have you speak to that because I know that's more of your area of expertise being over in the UK. But I just wanted to say, like, companies that have been around a while that, following these procedures like ProDog, those are key places to start because your DIY is very overwhelming and it's going to stop you before you even get started just because it's overwhelming. So I would just say, like, researching the companies that you feel comfortable with, asking them the questions. They should be open and transparent. But I'll have you speak to my question
Yes,
that I just
so we
asked.
have the FEDIAF, which is the European
Yeah.
Nutritional Standards, and so we collaborate with vets when we're formulating our recipes, and our complete and puppy range meet FEDIAF standards, and we've done that using only natural ingredients as well, so no synthetics in those ranges at all. So people can rest assured that all the ingredients in there are natural. We're totally transparent with all our recipes. All the ingredients are all on our website. We've got our about page on our website as well, and I will add all these links below. So if people check out our about page, we've got loads of information on there about all our testing, about our manufacturing, all the information about FEDIAF standards and our recipes.
Oh, no, it's good. No, it's perfect. I mean, I think here's the thing too. So there's different for people here, because I know you have people also from the States and then also um, UK predominantly. There's going to be those different regulations. So over here in the States, AFCO, NRC, your FEDIAF is like a level up from those, to be honest. But that's what you need to, if the company isn't going to formulate based on those, that's a red flag to me, because that is a regulation that's really important to make sure that we are ticking the boxes that we're going to hit your dog's nutritional needs and requirements. So I feel like following that is really important. And for everyone here who's like, I'm ready to go to the DIY level, this is where making sure that you're either using resources that are helping to guide you based on those requirements because they're bare minimum, and then or using someone like a certified nutritionist that has been doing this for a while. There are a lot of resources and books out there too that have fully balanced recipes that you can use too. So make sure you're using some type of source like that. But once again, like, start easy, use a pre-made like raw food company, get started there. And then, I always say transition over to the DIY if that's something for you. It's not for everyone. And, it's not for me with my cats. Like, for one, cats are super picky. And I'm like, I'm not going to take the time to do this and then have you like turn your nose up at it. That's just me personally. And that's okay. I work with a lot of cat parents that also DIY and their cats eat it. But time wise, that just isn't interesting to me. I did it with Finn, and he absolutely loved it and it was great. So it's, give yourself grace through this process, because there can be like a lot of guilt and shame that comes in this like online space with raw feeding too. Like, the bowl needs to be beautiful and perfect, and that puts people off too. Like, if you were to see the plates that I feed my kitties, it looks like a mushed meat. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be beautiful. You don't have to do this perfectly. Like, just get started. The body is very forgiving too. Like, just have fun with it. And honestly, just take the first step and get started. And you'll see that once again, those transformations, and watch your dog's health really like go to
That's
the next
really good
level.
advice, because there's so much out there on social media, and fancy looking photographs of these beautiful laid out bowls of food, and you know, my dog
Yeah, it's like, that's why I don't
my
post on
dog's
that.
bowl doesn't
It's
look
not
like that
pretty.
at all, and to be fair, he eats it all in 5 seconds flat anyway. He doesn't mind.
Yeah,
He doesn't
yeah.
mind.
He'd be mad if you were, like, taking the time to set up, like, the perfect little, like, the little legs sticking out, or, like, the little it's all, like, beautiful. They would be upset, like, my cats would have none of it, and Finn, he was, like, barking and spinning and excited, like, if I was making him wait longer, he'd just get stressed. So, it's this is
Yeah,
where just keep it simple, like the principle, keep it
yeah.
simple. Just start, just keep it simple, do what works the best for you, and then you can always go to the next level. That's the neat thing with this process, is that there is a next level if you want to go
Yes,
there.
and if anyone is out there and they're ready to make that switch, then ProDog throughout August, as part of Ditch the Dry month, we are offering our sample packs for 14.95. So that's usually, so the value of the food is 39.99. So you get 5 kilograms of food to get you started. So that's a really good deal for the month of August. And as we've just been talking about, like that convenience of just having that food there packaged, literally it's a case of allowing it to defrost and then serving it, and that's that. So again, I'll add all the links to those offers and everything below the video as well, so you can find those easily. Just moving on to another question then, are there any specific health conditions or breeds particularly benefit from a raw food diet, or is it's just across the board with all dogs?
So I would say, so just as a disclaimer, just because of the aging process, and raw food can be a little bit more cooling energetically, just from a Chinese food therapy perspective. Like, if you have an older dog, definitely reach out to ProDog Raw, and you guys are amazing at connecting and guiding and giving advice on, is this an appropriate diet for these types of pets? So if you have an older dog, sometimes it's not the most appropriate diet for them. However, for the majority of dogs, a raw food diet works really well for them. So I always say, reach out, ask those questions. You guys have an amazing team that answers questions very quickly, very in depth. You support pet parents really, really well. So I don't want to put people off of the raw, but I do want to just state that, because I can see where sometimes that isn't the most appropriate for an old dog. However, for dogs that are experiencing like allergies, food sensitivities, raw food diets are amazing. They often thrive on them. Same with the digestive issues, because there's going to be less in there to process. It's easier to digest too. And so things like your IBS, colitis, so diarrhea, IBD. I know a lot of pet parents are terrified to transition to that. So once again, reach out to someone, partner with them to help you transition if you are experiencing those conditions. But I put a ton of IBD patients on raw food, and it works so well. Now, also too, I'd be thinking about dogs who are overweight, right? Just for the benefits that we were talking about too, behavior issues because of the gut brain axis and that connection. It's incredible when a dog who's like reactive, they might have some like aggression stuff going on, noise reactivity, they're skittish or scared. Remember that microbiome is going to be directly influenced by the nutrition that we feed them. So those are the microbes living in the gut naturally. And when we shift over to a less processed food like raw, because of the connection between the vagus nerve, between the brain and the gut, and the communication that's actually happening there, we see dogs mellow out. It's like a new dog emerges. Now, there's a time and a place definitely for behavior training, desensitization, conditioning, all those things. That's huge. Also, I highly recommend doing that alongside the diet change. But definitely behavior problems, we have to look to the diet as part of their treatment protocol. So those would be the big areas. Now, certain breeds. So once again, disclaimer, all dogs, once again, just little care with older. However, there are certain breeds that are predisposed to allergy problems. So like here, I work with a lot of pit bulls, fantastic animals. However, they are really prone to allergies. So a raw food diet from the start, really, really helpful. Golden retrievers, they're known for getting everything, including skin conditions. Your Frenchies are a big one. They're notorious. Your bulldogs, like these guys need as much help as possible. Yes, genetics can play a part, but I'm of the mindset and personal belief system from the research and also seeing it with my clients that genes essentially, they are not the destiny of your pet. So you can manipulate gene expression through the food we feed, through the environment, using herbs. There's a lot of different ways to do that. But food, once again, food is medicine. Food is a foundation of health. So we can really help these kiddos by getting them onto a raw food diet at the start and supporting what their body needs, helping them get those vitamins and minerals, supporting a healthy microbiome. The rest of the body is also connected to that. So I would say those would be kind of the big ones that I'd be looking at. Actually, I have to mention Westies also. They are really notorious for getting things like atopic dermatitis or allergies. So getting them onto a raw food diet would be really powerful
Yeah,
also.
and as Dr. Katie just said, if you are sitting at home wondering, thinking about your dog's specific needs, then please do contact us. We have our in-house canine nutritionist team, and they can offer you really good one-to-one guidance on your dog's particular needs as well. Again, I'll share the links for how you can get in contact with us below as well. But don't be afraid to reach out. Just ask the questions, and we can help you out with that. So I've got another three really common myths that I hear all the time when I'm talking to people about feeding a natural diet, or feeding raw, I should say. One is that it's complicated, and obviously we've touched on that already, and we've spoken about, it doesn't need to be complicated. And if you start out by buying from a raw food company where the meals are already made for you, then it's very, very easy, very simple, and very convenient. But what about that raw feeding is expensive? Because that's another one, and obviously,
Mm.
it's a genuine concern for people with the financial aspect of it. What would you say to people who are a bit worried about the cost of feeding a natural diet?
Yeah, here's the thing. It can be more expensive than say like some of these really cheap,
Mhm.
poor quality kibbles, like hands down. It can be, but the thing is that we also have to look at what are the long-term side effects too. So we know that the kibble can lead to more inflammation in the body. It can lead to really expensive disease concerns down the road. So yes, it may seem like it's a little bit more than feeding this cheaper kibble. However, long term, I can tell you personally, my dog had a brain tumor. Diagnosing the brain tumor was $10,000 by itself. That didn't include any treatment, other testing, or other things like that. So yeah, raw food, we can't guarantee there'll never be a health problem. But what I do see and know to be true in my personal experience is that pets who are on less processed food, we are removing the resistance to them achieving optimal health and also to the healing process. So we're supporting the body's innate way of healing, and that's really powerful. The other piece to that too is there's a lot of ways now, right now, food prices are through the roof. Like at the time of this, like we're talking. So I can understand a lot of people are struggling financially, and I want to honor and respect that too. So I want to give you once again permission to start small. If you can only do like raw food diets for a couple meals a week and you still need to feed like a kibble diet, it is so much better than doing nothing. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can mix the two together. Your dog will be safe. It'll be okay. I know that's another myth we're not even talking about, of mixing the two, but you can definitely do that. So if you can add it in, get some more fresh food into that diet, there are studies that show it actually helps and can improve their health. The other tools or resources that I look at to help lower the cost, this is where, if you are, see, like, shop around, see like what is, if you're using pre-made, do your cost evaluation. If you're looking to go DIY, work with, your certified pet nutritionist, holistic vets, make sure there's some good resources for doing balanced recipes. And I know you guys have a lot of great resources. We also have some resources for free recipes and nutrition and things like that too at the Natural Pet Doctor. But looking at, if you're going to DIY, and look for these ingredients yourself, buying in bulk can be really cost effective. Looking for sales at the grocery store for yourself and then stocking up. We have a little, like, a little freezer, like what is it called? The little freezer in my garage. So we can put a lot of meats in there and store them to use them. Source locally. If you can, go to your local farmers, support them. They need all the support that you can give them. But a lot of times, local farmers or butchers are getting rid of things like organ meats, and they're just discarding them. So I have a lot of clients who will go there and get them, and it's like cheap, or it's free sometimes. So look into those resources, co-ops. Those would all be things that I'd be looking at for, like, kind of reducing your cost if you are going to DIY. But once again, like, giving permission to people to, you don't have to, it's not
Yeah.
all or nothing. Do what you're able to do, and it'll make a huge difference to your pet. So just do the best that you can.
Um, but this third one
Yeah.
is this is a really important one, I think, because when people visit their vet and their vet doesn't advocate raw feeding and tries to guide them away from going down that route, what advice would you have for people in that position?
Yeah, this is really hard because it breaks my heart every time I hear it. And unfortunately, I hear it a lot. It's almost a daily thing where my vet said this will kill my pet. Like, none of us here want to do something that could harm or, of course, kill our pet. And so what happens is so many people are terrified to start, because I love my veterinary colleagues and I can understand where they're coming from, because I also was trained in the way of being scared to recommend some of these diets, because we're not taught it in vet school. We're taught to feed those processed food diets. And there's a whole nother conversation we could have probably around the politics of vet school training and, like, where the funding comes from and all those things. But your vet's honestly doing the best that they can with that knowledge and information. However, if they're completely closed minded to you feeding a raw food diet, if you're able to, and I recognize not everyone is able to due to location, you might not have other vets that you can go to, but see if you can find someone who is at least open and is okay with you feeding that food. Now, one of the other ways that I teach, like, my clients to approach their veterinarian, because I have some clients that their vet is not into any of the things that I do as an integrative vet with, like, herbs and raw food diets and Chinese medicine and all those things, and that's okay. However, this is what we have to work with. And so, what I always say is, rather than just saying you're doing a raw food diet, I would actually word it this way. I would say I feed a minimally processed fresh food diet that is actually balanced by a certified nutritionist and is approved by a veterinarian. And if you're feeding like ProDog, you're 100% right. You're not lying. You're not, you know, you're telling the truth. You're speaking the truth. As a veterinarian, when I hear that, for one, it gives me peace of mind that you're like, okay, these people have done their research and I might not know anything about that, but I'm going to be more open to having a conversation versus shutting down. The biggest fears that my veterinary colleagues have is that you're going to feed a diet that's unbalanced and potentially going to create harm or disease long term. So rewatch that piece. You can rewind it, listen back to that. That works really well. it may not work in every situation, but that way also too, if your vet's like, that's interesting, what you can say in response to that too, I'm more than happy to share some of the resources to connect you to who I'm using so that you can continue to have those conversations too if you're open to it. What that does is it kind of puts people's guards down, right? We don't want the whole like, I don't want to listen. We get our backs up, we get into an argument and fight. Everything shuts down at that point. There's no further communication. So by sharing that information, keeping an open mind, encouraging them to look at the research that we have, look at some of the studies that I mentioned, going to ProDog's website, looking at the blogs and all the resources that are on there. We have tons of resources too. Share those with your veterinarian, but have an open conversation and just word it a little bit different. You don't have to get it exact spot on, but I found kind of wording it that way is very helpful to getting your vet on board, or at least for them being like, okay, it sounds like you know what you're doing. And then that piece is done.
That is
So hopefully that
perfect,
makes
Katie.
sense.
It's so good to have to just have that wording, to know exactly how to position it, because sometimes it is just that tiny switch in positioning of language can just make all the difference for people. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing your valuable insights, your expertise. And for those of you who do feel inspired to learn more about the benefits of a natural diet for your dogs, and for those of you who are ready to take the leap and make the switch, we've got a ton of really helpful articles and information on our website. As I've said, I'll share the links below the video. We've also got our Ditch the Dry landing page. And on that page, you'll find we've got a free video series, which has been recorded by one of our colleagues, Dr. Nick Thompson, alongside ProDog's behaviourist, Caroline Spencer. And they share all you need to know to get started in making that switch. And all you need to do is enter your email address and you'll get those videos direct to your inbox. We also have a few special offers for those of you who are new to Raw. As I've mentioned, we've got an offer on our sample packs of $14.95 for the month of August. So that's a really great way to kickstart your dog's raw diet. And also, if you check out our Ditch the Dry landing page, we have got a competition running during August as well, where you could win £150 worth of ProDog products. So that's food, treats, or supplements. Go and check that out. As I've said, all the links are below. And so for those of you who are on Facebook, we have our ProDog Rebellion Facebook group as well. That is where Alison Frost, our canine nutritionist, Caroline Spencer, our in-house behaviourist, are available regularly in that group, offering advice, offering support. It's also a really great place to connect with a community of like-minded pet owners. You can also find Dr. Katie at the naturalpetdoctor.com. She has her YouTube channel. She's also on Instagram, and she's also got a ton of resources, some free workshop, loads of information on her website. So go and look her up also. And don't forget, if you've got friends, family, neighbours who you know aren't yet feeding a fresh natural diet, then please do share this video with them. Share our Ditch the Dry landing page, and hopefully we can work together to help our dogs become healthier and happier. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.